Hello everyone, this is Bill Griffin. Welcome to the Different Take podcast. Today I want to talk about flip-flops, which is the idea that a politician changes positions. And this is a term that isn't really used as commonly as it once was. Flip-flops were called quite a bit, and then that language was softened to, well, the president walked back his position, or they changed their narrative, and their surrogates spin the change of position in such a way, and it's typically leftist, left-wing media that use those terminologies, but it's still used to a certain extent. Recently, or this year, Joe Biden changed position on the Senate filibuster, which Biden was in the Senate something like 34 years or something. I can't remember, but it was a very long time. He was unopposed or had very little competition in his state of Delaware, which is quite small, and he was an established legacy sort of senator. And he was very much in favor and spoke to maintain this filibuster. Filibuster is a procedure in the Senate which requires 60 votes to cut off debate to vote on an issue. The vote itself only requires a majority, but to cut off debate requires 60 senators to vote out of 100. So in essence, it requires 60 votes to get anything done, to get through any legislation to get through the Senate. The effect of this is what would happen is senators would vote to cut off debate and then vote against the measure so that they could go back to their state and explain to their constituents, well, I really wasn't for the thing that passed, but I thought that there should have been a vote. And of course, the senator, he or she, knows full well that it is going to pass, but they would sell that reasoning to their constituents. So I'd like to talk about flip-flop, a couple of flip-flops, and see how, I think you'll see where this is going and see how that applies to the situation with Joe Biden in 2022. So this is George Bush, 1988, Republican candidate for president, in his acceptance speech to become the nominee. This is what he said.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
One can only interpret that to mean that under no circumstances would he go along with any increases in taxes, federal code, and it was a clear message to the American people and to Congress. You can bring me legislation, but I will not sign it under any circumstances. Of course, he did. And in 2014, he was awarded. He was given an award for courage. So this is an article from U.S. News or Reuters. It's by Elizabeth Barber. It's dated May 4th, 2014. Former U.S. President George H.W. Bush showed courage in breaking his Read My Lips, No New Taxes campaign pledge to broker a 1990 budget compromise that may have cost him re-election 2 years later. It didn't help him, to be sure. There were campaign ads that the Clinton campaign ran showing how he broke his word. One could easily say he showed cowardice, not courage. So when you talk about courage versus cowardice, he could have very well have shown courage by sticking to his pledge, but he didn't. The article goes on further. This is his granddaughter, Lauren Bush, niece of former President George W. Bush, accepted the award on her grandfather's behalf. This award was given by the the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation. This is 2014. This is some 26 years after, 24 years after he broke his pledge in 1990. Lauren Bush, quote, "Candidly speaking, my grandfather did not want to raise taxes in 1990. She said, well, of course he didn't, because that pretty famous quote in his speech well before 1990. At any rate, she goes on, but in our constitutional system of governance, Congress also gets a say, and more than that, he felt he owed the American people action and results. In the same way that Congress gets a say today, with the Senate 50-50 and Biden all in favor of abolishing the filibuster, at least for one issue, and we'll get to that in just a second. So that was a pretty famous flip-flop. Read my lips, no new taxes. It's hard to think of a bigger, messier flip-flop than that one for a political, for anybody in politics, except maybe for Joe Biden with this filibuster. In the substance of it sort of pales in comparison, but I'll get to that. The second flip-flop I want to talk about is also another Bush, Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush signed a pledge in 2015 when he was running for president that he would support the Republican nominee, no matter who it is. And Donald Trump signed this pledge, and when interviewed about this pledge during the time, I remember quite well, and you go back and look at various videos, but he did this on multiple occasions on several different news channels and interviews that, well, what if Donald Trump is nominated? And instead of answering the question, he would deflect with, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. In total denial of what eventually would happen. But instead of just answer the question outright, he just, I will support Donald Trump, or I won't support him, or I will support the nominee. I signed the pledge to support the nominee, and I will do that. Nope, he doesn't do that. He just simply says Donald Trump won't be elected, so I don't have to answer the question. And of course, that couldn't have helped, in my opinion, didn't help his campaign, which was frankly doomed from the start. I don't think the United States of America would have elected a third Bush. It's just kind of we don't have a monarchy in our country. You get elected for office, and the idea that three people from the same family, a son and two brothers, could get elected amongst the huge population that we have and the number of people that we could select from, that we're going to do that. It's kind of, I think, kind of odd. But at any rate, he broke his pledge. This is from the New Republic, May 6, 2016. Headline, Jeb Bush broke his pledge to support the Republican nominee. In a Facebook post, Bush announced that he could not in good conscience vote for Donald Trump, saying Trump had not demonstrated the temperament or strength of character needed to lead the United States. It's as if he did not know much about Donald Trump's temperament or strength of character prior to signing that pledge. He did not know. So it's a pretty, I guess it's pick on Bush Day, the Bushes. That was another famous flip-flop. So let's talk about Biden's flip-flop on the Senate filibuster. It's pretty expedient. And let's see what type of pitfalls this may open for Democrats. And just talk about how the filibuster has been changed a bit in recent years. Harry Reid, Senate Majority Leader during the Obama administration. This is according to CNN. This is written recently. Headline: This is Harry Reid's biggest legacy. CNN. Chris Chaliza, January 4, 2022. I'll just go to the middle of the article. Back in 2013, frustrated by Senate Republicans' blockade of then-President Barack Obama's judicial nominees, Reed changed the filibuster rules to not apply to federal judgeships below the Supreme Court level. So, in the near term, it's true that change allowed Obama appointees to get confirmed through the Senate. But what it also did was when the Senate changed hands and Mitch McConnell became majority leader, a lot of Donald Trump appointees now sit on federal benches throughout the country. And it also allowed or made a path for sure for McConnell to change the rules to allow the Senate to confirm Supreme Court justices. So what is commonly referred to as there being conservative justice or a Democrat appointed justice and a Republican appointed justice, that allowed for Donald Trump to confirm 3 Supreme Court justices, and that number went from 5-4 to 6-3. So don't be careful what you wish for when you talk about eliminating these supermajorities, which is what Joe Biden is talking about doing. He's talking about eliminating the filibuster. So why does he want to do this? Well, it's not uncommon for a president to want to get rid of the filibuster because they can get their agenda through much easier with 51 votes out of 100 instead, which would be required, instead of 60. And with the number at 50-50 now, they can't get what they want through. But this isn't unusual that that presidents want to get rid of the filibuster. Check this out.
Choose to change the rules and put an end to democratic debate, then the fighting and the bitterness and the gridlock will only get worse.
And if all this takes eliminating the filibuster, another Jim Crow relic, in order to secure the God-given rights of every American, then that's what we should do.
The Senate, we have to get rid of what's called the filibuster rule.
Getting voting rights legislation passed and not getting passed as a filibuster, I support making an exception on voting rights for the filibuster.
It is not only a bad idea, it upsets the constitutional design and does a disservice to the country.
So you see, Barack Obama does not, when he's in the Senate, does not want to get rid of the filibuster. But today, not only does he want to get rid of it, he calls it a Jim Crow relic. Well, that wasn't what he said. You just heard him. Then you go to Donald Trump. Well, Donald Trump is all for getting rid of the filibuster because he's president and he wants to get his agenda passed. But Donald Trump didn't serve in the Senate and didn't say, hey, we need to keep the filibuster in place. So presidents or senators all for keeping it, but once they become elected president, they want to get rid of it as long as and only if they have control of their party has control of the Senate. Because if it's 51-49 instead of 50-50, one senator, do you really think Joe Biden wants to get rid of the filibuster? Well, of course not. And this is what Joe Biden has to say about the issue today. So he wants to make an exception for voting rights legislation, which I've done another episode on this legislation, which is called H.R. 1, which federalized elections. So this is to get a big legislative win, I suppose, appease the leftist in his party. But he is obviously, it's politically expedient. It's going to come back and haunt them once or if a Republican president is elected with a Senate majority. They can just do the same thing and get rid of that legislation. Maybe even go even farther than what the Democrats want them to go. So be careful what you wish for, Democrats and Joe Biden, because what's good for the goose is good for the gander, as they say. So why does he want to do this? Or what's the driving force behind this? Well, Stacey Abrams, who's running for governor in Georgia, she also wants Biden to lift the filibuster, and specifically for election reform legislation. So this is from the BrennanCenter.org. It's written by Tim Lau, L-A-U, April 26, 2021, so it's fairly recent. He goes through the history of the filibuster in more detail than I have, and from the standpoint of this is a way to get rid of Senate gridlock. The last paragraph, some advocates argue that voting rights legislation warrants an exemption from the filibuster, even if the procedure is not eliminated altogether. So it'll be eliminated if Republicans come into office in 2022, if it's eliminated altogether, and then they will pass legislation, which of course Biden will veto, and then the presidential candidates legislators will run on the results of that come 2024. And then maybe a Republican president gets elected with a Republican Senate, and all of this stuff that you passed gets reversed. So to go on, Stacey Abrams, the voting rights champion and former minority leader in the Georgia House of Representatives, has called on senators to lift the filibuster for election reform legislation, such as the For the People Act. So this particular legislation is important enough to drop the filibuster, but there will be another exception and another exception and another exception. That's the way. If you can't see that, you're not paying attention. And that's the purpose of me going back and talking about how politicians break their promises, no matter what party that they're in, and how senators want the filibuster intact when they're in office, because if they've been in the Senate for 36 years, as Joe Biden was, he knows there's going to be a Republican-controlled Senate at some point in time, and he doesn't want to be wants the ability to block certain things. So this goes on. Stacey Abrams, quote, "Protection of democracy is so fundamental that it should be exempt from the filibuster rules," she said, noting that the filibuster has already been suspended for judicial and cabinet appointments, among other measures. And as I talked about with Harry Reid, be careful what you wish for. So the interesting thing to me about this is leftists are really pushing hard to get rid of the filibuster and get things passed. And they refer to this election reform legislation. If you don't vote for it, you're blocking minorities from the right to vote, and it's a sort of racist thing, or maybe they're saying that overtly in many cases. Some politicians try to avoid going there, but even Democrats, but a lot of them do. The idea that if it's such a great idea, why don't you get 60 votes? I mean, the United States is in built up a lot of debt, spent a lot of money, which has an impact on inflation, to be sure, because it forces the Federal Reserve to expand the money supply. I've talked about this many times. So how in the world did all of this money get spent? Well, it got spent because there wasn't enough gridlock. So imagine how much havoc can be wreaked on our country if the filibuster is done away with, in my opinion. Now, simple majority rules. If the filibuster was changed, as I said, it works both ways. But what you'll have is a swinging from one administration, one set of philosophies to another, and nobody can count on any sort of stability. There's just a swinging back and forth to whatever political winds are blowing at the time. And unfortunately, our leftist media, which is still dominant, still has a lot a lot of influence in that area, and hopefully people will understand that that's what's going on. They'll leave that information, those sources behind, and use other information sources. At least that's my hope, because you're being fed a lot of malarkey on a daily basis. So my prediction is that this filibuster thing won't happen. Biden won't get his way, and this election reform legislation will not pass. But who knows? Stranger things have happened. It would only take one Democrat senator, only one, to stop this. And Joe Manchin is from a state that voted for Trump in a big way. Democrats will not. I don't think he would switch and get rid of the filibuster. At least he said he would not. And we'll see how it goes. So I want to thank you for listening to me. I really appreciate it. Please check out the platforms we're on. Please let me have it with any comments that you have. I really appreciate those, and I'm interested to see how folks disagree with me as well. So thank you for listening.